Are we nothing but characters in a holodeck? Is there no meaning to life? These questions and others will be answered as we face the wrath of the holodeck in search of enlightenment and voyage to the lowdown or lower decks. Good morning to all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. This is the Lowdown on Lower Decks, and I am your co host, Mr. Josh Pritchett, author, writer, and, author, film critic, and head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group. And I am joined today by a gentleman who burned up his couch in honor of Tennessee's victory over Alabama yesterday, Mr. Chris Pabone.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning to all the Orange Faithful alumni of the University of Tennessee. And I am apologies again to my neighbors, but yes, indeed, couches were burned yesterday, not only here in Maryland, but in Tennessee and all over the quadrant, and dare I say the Federation, because the University of Tennessee finally, after 16 years, beat the University of Alabama. It was a joyous day. It was a great sunrise for those of us who never slept to see it rise. And also a shout out to all the members of the Vindictiverse, about which we will talk about on today's episode.
Oh yes, we are revisiting the Vindictiverse because, of course, as we saw, I think it was last season, when Ensign Mariner made a holodeck movie about her alter ego Vindicta, and we are revisiting that concept again with a brand new holodeck movie that this time Boiler has created for us. So, and we had some really interesting twists and turns on this episode, didn't we, Chris?
I will just say, Josh, that after watching this episode, it was chronogasmic.
And I think if folks will understand what we mean when we get further into this episode. So, without further ado, let's hit it and go right to the recap of the episode. So, the episode opens with the Cerrito fighting a Romulan warship as they're trying to protect some sort of device. The Romulans suddenly steal it, and out of nowhere comes the starship Wayfarer, captained by Captain Bradifers Dagger, who is actually Brad Boimler. And we find out that this is a holodeck movie that Brad has made up to entertain him, Trendy, Rutherford, and Mariner. It's a sequel to Mariner's own holodeck movie about Vindicta, which we saw last season, in which an evil version of herself attempted to wipe out the Cerritos crew. Um, and what ends up happening is midway through the beginning of the Hollow movie, Brad is called to the commander's office, and he gets some very bad news. Chris, you want to take it from there?
Thank you, Josh. And I will just say that although there's some concerns about the content being reflective of the first Vindictiverse movie, but the special effects are pretty incredible.
Oh,
Um, uh,
yes.
so you
Much
have
high
two.
budget.
Yes. Crisis Point visually is spectacular. So all of a sudden we have two branches going on story wise: the A plot, which is what's going on inside the movie Crisis Point, and two, what's going on personally with Boimler / Captain Dagger, and Captain Dagger returns much less jubilant than he had been, and they go down to the looking for information about the Chronogami, which is what the Romulan triplets have stolen, which is an homage to the Duras sisters, but because Romulans always do things one step better, these are triplets rather than just. And so we see someone who's clearly an homage to Dr. Brahms, and as noted by Mariners, he's like incredibly hot and totally in for Captain Dagger, which as we've seen throughout the season, women just seem to fall for Boimler, and he doesn't realize it. But in this case, he seems especially distracted and just kind of walks away from her advances, which is like totally, Mariner doesn't get it, and so she provides them with a watch that helps them track the chronogami that has been lost, and they end up at Tatashiori 9, which is a reference to, of course, Fred Tatashiori, who does the voice of Jax, our favorite reborn DS9 / Bajoran chief of security aboard the Cerritos. And so they beam down to the planet, and Boimler is still, he's very distracted, and he hears some secondary characters generated by the hologram program, and decides, no, I don't want to go looking for this thing. I want to instead go looking for the meaning of life. And Mariner is like beside herself because like these are just secondary characters that have no plot line. It's just generated as fill-in by the program. But Captain Dagger is determined, and he names on a point that's going to become relevant very soon. He names Tandy as the acting captain, and they go off on a very cool chase on some grab bikes. That is a reference to, of course, like the dune buggy scene, but much better from Star Trek Nemesis. And so off they go to chasing on the chronogami, which leads to several checkpoints in time as they're chasing the Romulans. And on the side, we have Captain Dagger looking for the meaning of life, and Mariner's like, okay, I'm out of here. This is dumb. This is like unworthy of the Vindictiverse. And she exits because he's got to go to a performance review with Ransom that goes surprisingly well. And then she finds out why Boimler is so bummed out, or Captain Dagger's bummed out because his clone, which is, some of you might remember from season 2, episode 1 of when he was in the Titan, has passed away. And so this is what's caused these inner reflections. And so, Josh, do you want to talk about where each of the two other subplots go, the A and B points?
Yes, thank you, Chris. Mm-hmm. So, finding out that William Boimler has died in a bizarre accident. Apparently, there was something wrong with the life support unit in his quarters, and he died in his sleep. Mariner goes back to rejoin Boimler and help him on his mission, being the supportive friend that she is, and then realizes that Boimler, failing to lead this crew of the quote faithful to finding this planet of enlightenment, has been cast into the brig, and she's cast there with him. And then they begin to, trying to work out, hey, no, your idea wasn't too bad. No, your idea was pretty good. And, getting together and realizing, yeah, we have to finish this movie because it's not just a movie. It's a Starfleet movie. And that's what makes it important. So they escape the brig with the help of one of the extras who's called Knick-Knack. And they then retake the ship and discover that the alien bad guy actually has the map to the planet of enlightenment on his back, but they have to fold his skin together like the old back covers of Bad magazine to find the location. They find it, and there is a godlike being there. Meanwhile, on the other side of the holodeck, Tendi and Rutherford, along with holographic versions of the rest of the Cerritos crew, have gone back in time, apparently to old San Francisco, where a giant squid who's the ancestor of a Federation ambassador is on display at an aquarium. They are harassed by a group of punk rockers from the 80s that, of course, they easily defeat. But Rutherford wants to take their clothes and put them on so he could disguise himself. Tendy's quite annoyed with him because he's not taking this seriously. And then they end up in the 21st century, right when Captain Archer is about to give his famous speech to the new Federation delegation. Sorry, I said 21st. I meant late 22nd century. And they have to take apart a bomb. And Rutherford's still not taking this seriously. The holographic version of Captain Talar is killed by a Romulan that Tendi then kills. And she blurts out, "You're not taking it seriously," because nobody would take it seriously because I want to be a captain and nobody would ever take me seriously. And Rutherford's like, "Of course I take you seriously. I didn't know you wanted to be a captain." So, Rutherford decides he's going to take the rest of the adventure very seriously. And they then decide they recapture the chronogami and use it to basically kind of a la Marvel style, go back in time and prevent the Romulans from stealing it in the first place. Meanwhile, back on the planet, Brad has realized that the alien godlike being is only just giving out Hallmark card pleasantries. It's not really helping him. He attacks it and finds some sort of reference to the Kitty Hawk, the aircraft that the Wright brothers made. I'm wondering if that's a reference to the Orville. We'll get into that later. And then he meets Captain Sulu, who is now occupying Captain Kirk's old farm that we saw in the movie Star Trek Generations. And he gives him some sage wisdom that helps him get over his malaise. And then he wakes up in sickbay because he got so overexcited in the holodeck that he forgot to drink any water and became massively dehydrated. And our heroes realize, yeah, hey, that was a great movie. It was a lot of fun. And wow, aren't we glad it didn't end on a cliffhanger? Chris, you want to take it from where the cliffhanger goes?
Yes, because we all have issues with cliffhangers. So it seems we're cliffhanger free until we see, and perhaps a reference to Star Trek 2, there's a torpedo tube that gets beamed aboard a ship, and Boimler's in there. And it turns out Boimler's death was faked, and he is now joining Section 31, which is a secretive organization, even though, as Boimler points out, they wear distinctive communicator badges, and maybe they shouldn't be doing that if they want to be a secretive organization. But it is a woman who offers him the place in Section 31, and Boimler laughs maniacally when he accepts the position, and then you view from outside that the ship is the Defiant, and then it goes off, and then scene. So we had a cliffhanger after all.
Yes, we did. So something to build on in future episodes, because I think the last couple of weeks we've had the whole thing with Peanut Hamper and Annihilus, or sorry, not Annihilus.
Jeffrey Combs' character.
Jeffrey Combs, thank you, appreciate it. Jeffrey Combs' character and a few other references. So I'm wondering if the bad guys are all going to get together. Lower Decks' bad guys are all going to get together, because that seems to be the big plot line for season 3 of Picard. And so getting into the good, the bad, and the Gorn. Wow, I think this episode really blew me away. I think this was amazing what they did. This whole episode was a love letter to all of the Star Trek movies, from the motion picture all the way through the Kelvin Timeline movies. And there's a lot of references to things that diehard fans who have looked at a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. Like Mariner makes this line when we find out time travel is going to be the premise of Crisis Point 2, is, oh wait, are we going to have to go back in time and kill Kennedy or something? And for fans who have read about the behind the scenes stuff that went on with Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, it turns out that Roddenberry's idea for a second Star Trek movie was the Enterprise goes back in time either to prevent or cause the death of President Kennedy. And of course, Paramount did not go for that idea, thankfully.
Thankfully.
Yes, that would have been bad. And then I think obviously you had the whole thing where, okay, the giant squid was a stand-in for the whales in Star Trek 4. The torpedo tube, as you already pointed out, reference to Spock being dead and everything, and you get references to homages and references to everything, like Generations with Sulu showing up, and of course, personally, I'd rather Sulu showed up than Kirk, but that's just me, just because I like George Takei a lot. You get all that, and you get, of course, Tendi, announcing she wants to be a captain, which, no Orion has ever become a Federation Starfleet captain. So that would be historical for her. We've really seen her in the last 2 seasons really explode as a character. First, with going into medical training, and now she wants to be the captain of her own ship. So, Chris, what did you think was amongst the good?
So in this episode and throughout the season, I would say the good is the character development that we've seen. That everyone gets the focus throughout the season. I mean, now we get to see the focus a bit on. It looked like it was going to be Boimler, but it turns out it's Tendi. So it's the character development that we've seen, I think, that has been not only good but outstanding throughout the season, and especially this episode with the reveal that from Tendi that, hey, I want to be a captain, and if I can't get you to take me seriously in this holodeck novel, how am I going to get people to take me seriously that I want to be a captain?
Right, exactly. And that it was really frustrating for her. And then when Rutherford realized, oh, that's what you want to do. Okay, I totally love you to be my captain. I totally would follow you. And he realizes he needs to take this a little bit more seriously because she wants to be the one to make all these really big decisions and be in the center chair. And I was glad he did that, because in some ways he was sort of standing in for kind of the kind of peripheral fan we all know. I mean, you and I, obviously, we take Star Trek, it's pretty serious, and well, not so seriously that we can't laugh at ourselves in shows like Lower Decks, but we have that one fan, friend who, okay, they come along, but they kind of make a little fun of it because they don't really get it. They don't really get what our vision of Star Trek, what we think of Star Trek and why it's so, important to us. And I think that that was a really well written part. What else did we like?
So I liked the look of the cinematic universe, which is the uniforms are darker, right? And so it just kind of elevates that idea of, like, you have the TV shows, then you have the movie versions, and how the movie versions always, if you notice, the uniforms actually do tend to be a little bit darker. The ships tend to be a little bit bigger. Like the Wayfarer is definitely, well, Josh, you're our resident ship expert. That was what is that, Sovereign class?
That was a Sovereign class. It looked like it was a Sovereign class, but it looked like it was an upgraded Sovereign class because the nacelle mounts seemed to curve more in, but it definitely had the neck and body look of a Sovereign class.
So, yeah.
So I thought at first I thought it was an Odyssey class, which we're going to see in season 3 of Picard, but no, I'm pretty sure that was just an upgraded Sovereign. So sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh no, they did just enough to make the cinematic universe look different than the regular Lower Decks universe, and so kudos to, like, the production design of doing that. And then my neck is still hurting a bit, not only from, like, carrying the couch upstairs, but also from the whiplash of so many nods that we had here, Easter eggs, down to, like, for example, the Sydney Aquarium obviously is an homage to the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Obviously, and not just the Star Trek universe. I thought that when Boimler asks Sulu, "Is this the Nexus or is heaven?" and he says it's actually Idaho, I thought that was a bit of a Field of Dreams reference when it's out, like, "Is this heaven?" So there were just so many references to not only popular culture moments in movies, but also to Star Trek universe. And again, I love how they emphasize the importance of, hey, this is the Vindictiverse, right? Standing in for the Star Trek universe. And like, we've got to do things well here. And like, there are rules and we can't just like, half dog it. And, you know, and I just also love like the, the references that what could happen with time travel, such as when Mariner is getting very frustrated with Captain Dagger and tells him, like, Tandy and all the others could be riding ancient crocodiles in Egypt without us right now. And also just the tongue-in-cheek references, for example, to Star Trek Five, when they say, like, there's always a catch with these God stories. It's it was just sort of a love letter to specific moments throughout all different movies that somehow, some way, they managed to pull together into an excellent episode.
Yeah, it really was that and more, because you could tell they really we pointed this out many times, is that Mike McManus and the rest of the folks behind Lower Decks are Star Trek fans at heart, and that's how they're able to write such great material, because they've watched everything Star Trek, even the bad stuff, and they know what's funny and they know what to take seriously. It is a fan show, but it's a great fan show, and I think what they had here was I thought, yeah, okay. I mean, Star Trek Five is not exactly considered the best of Star Trek movies by a lot of fans.
Wait, there was a Star Trek Five?
There was rumored.
Okay, right.
There are rumors of it, but for some reason they bypassed it and went to Star Trek 6.
Thank God.
Yes, thank God. But you really can't do a big idea like going and finding God, because that's what is God. You can't narrow that down, because no one's got the what could it be, and it's different for everyone. So of course you're going to end up with an alien that's just going to give you platitudes that are an attempt to try to make you feel better and sound profound, but you realize this is BS. This isn't helping me. This isn't fixing my problem. And ultimately I think Boimler kind of goes on sort of a vision quest by finding himself in Idaho and talking to Sulu about it. And realizing that, hey, I just, it's not about looking for a meaningful life, in the hopes of having a meaningful death. It's about just living and doing the best you can, and that's all you can really hope to do. And I was glad that they did ask George Takei to be in that episode, because I thought it was really nice, and maybe hints that maybe he's going to show up at a distant point. Well, hopefully again in a future episode of Lower Decks. I would certainly enjoy that.
Well, I loved having George, who's plenty busy these days for those who watch Resident Alien. He was also in the finale of that.
Yes.
And I just love, again, the dig at Kirk when he says, "Oh, yeah, I took this place off Kirk's hand. He had to go time travel or something. The man could never relax," which is true. I also liked that there was a lot of heart in this episode. And I don't mean in the romantic subplot with Knick-Knack and Captain Dagger, but the loss that has been suffered by Boimler, and you see the natural reaction, which is he's kind of lost, and he's kind of not sure what to do, which I think is something that it does happen, and the unseen emotional punch of we see Tandy's taking all this so seriously, and we don't realize why. It's like, because all of a sudden the reveal about the captain thing, but there was a lot of emotion going in addition to adventure, which are the key hallmark, with along with special effects, are the key hallmarks of a movie in the Vindicta universe. And again, as I mentioned before, there are small moments that you see within Lower Decks that you think, okay, this might have been a toss away moment. And no, it comes back. I mean, like, who of us thought that we would see a Crisis Point 2, another movie in the Vindicta universe? I mean, I don't think any of us did. At least I didn't. So that leaves me open and hopeful to, like, maybe not next season, but if there's a season after that, we will keep on getting sequels to the Vindictiverse, or held within the Vindictiverse.
We might even get spin-offs. I mean, I think the next Vindictiverse 3 should be written by Tendi.
By Tendi or Rutherford, but yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. So there was a chalk ton of good in this episode, and like I said, it was chronogasmic for me.
Yes. I agree. It was wonderful. I rewatched it again this morning. I'm gonna watch it again later this afternoon with a friend of mine. And I mean, it is fun to see all the like little drop-ins of references to other Star Trek shows and movies and things. And like we said at the top of the show, it is a it. Oh, there's one other thing I want to point out is Knick Knack turning into a big giant monster. Well, of course, that's a shout out to the Kelvin timeline, because okay, you can't do a Kelvin, you can't do a JJ movie unless you have a giant monster somewhere in there, and also the fact that the ship and took a the alien ship took a slightly Star Wars esque look about it, which I guess could you read into it just a broken down cargo vessel in any sci-fi universe, but um, I just kind of thought more of that, but that's not knocking the Kelvin timeline at all. I enjoy it quite a bit. Um,
I want to get back to the Kelvin timeline in the Gorn section.
Oh yeah, okay, we'll do that. So let's move on to the bad. I only had one real complaint. Where's Jennifer?
Yes.
Why did we rewrite her into the movie?
Well, I can only assume that there was only enough screen time to go around in this episode, so some things, probably were left out in the editing and on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, that's a yeah. Well, okay, maybe we'll get that in the special edition Blu-ray. The Jennifer scene.
The Jennifer scene will definitely be included in one of those special Lower Decks metal tins that you see. The collector's edition being sent around. So the bad, well, I feel bad for Stevens, and not only because he was burned not once but twice that day in the warp core, but
Yeah,
it turns out that he is not one of Ransom's buddies after all. Because when Ransom reveals that the death that Boimler was experiencing, he says, "Yeah, I would need my buddies to get through this," and he shows the picture of the whale and some other people. And yeah, Stevens would be crossed to know that Ransom does not consider him one of his best buds.
yeah. Come on, Ransom. Let Stevens be in the clique, okay? He's a good guy. He's got a lot of heart.
Yeah, a little hard. It's hard to find anything that I disliked about this episode. You know, and I'm usually a tiny bit of a nitpicker, though I try not to be, but I just can't in this one. I mean, everything from, like, the bigger, larger ship to the references of time travel, or even, like, the nods to, like, this can't be an alien or the weak bullshit. It's just everything was pitch perfect.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the best episodes this year, and I think it's the writing on Lower Decks is so solid each week. I feel like, I mean, they really know how to knock it out of the park. We've got some real talent in that room. It's just too bad, I'm not trying to knock the other shows, but it's I wish some of their writers could step in and write some episodes for like Discovery or some of the other Star Trek shows.
I mean, again, maybe a bad would be that, at least I would like to reference to when Boimler passed out and was clinically dead for a few minutes. that they would have said the holodeck safety guards clicked in when they realized he was, in his life was in danger, and they beamed him automatically to sick bay or something. I mean, I'm buying that. Okay, that Tendi found him and then dragged him to sick bay, but maybe some reference to the holodeck safety guards, because you always have them like turn them off, turn them off. Well, okay, what are they specifically supposed to do? I mean, like in a time of danger, like if you accidentally somehow get injured, but that's incredibly minor overall. I mean, um mm, oh god, it's maybe second best episode, definitely third best episode of the season for me.
I'm gonna be hard pressed. It's really so hard because I think we had so many great episodes. The DS9 episode is probably
Still
my
one,
overall favorite. Hmm?
still number one.
Still number one, yeah. I'm gonna say this one's my second favorite. Although I did like the one where they were on the planet and all their subconscious fantasies were coming to life. That was quite good. But I think this one's going to be a very close second to the DS9 episode.
I mean, I'm putting the season premiere ahead of this one, but it's just by inches. I mean, after I watch it again, I might move it to second place. I mean, it was. I mean, how can you go wrong with the Vindictiverse?
You really can't. It's just too solid, and you can't get around it. You just can't get around it.
No, that's true.
So, so hopefully we will have more adventures in the Vindictiverse. Maybe even some spin-offs, some side stories, some Paramount Plus streaming shows. I'm ready for the merchandise. Bring it on. I've probably signed one of my future unborn children over to Disney. I'll sign the other one over to Paramount. So just get that out of the way. We'll have.
Don't you mean grandchildren? Because it's all been sold by now.
Probably. I'll mortgage them too.
Okay.
Oh man. So getting into the Gorn. You had something for that.
Yeah. So Joss, do you think that somewhere out there in an alternative timeline, there are younger versions of ourselves giving this recap of the episode?
If they do, I hope the other guy has hair.
Okay.
Yeah. That's no. I mean, according to Einsteinian physics, anything that can happen will happen in somebody's timeline. So, yeah, I don't see why not.
Which also makes me think, because my University of Tennessee beat Alabama yesterday after 16 years, if somehow I have fallen through a hole and I am now in the alternative universe.
Oh, well, I mean, you might be. I mean, who was the president when you left?
Well, it was President Hillary Clinton, of course.
Oh, well, that's good. Okay.
That's good.
All right. I'll find out what else was going on in your time. We're gonna have a talk after the episode.
Okay.
I think might have to bring you up to speed on a couple of things.
Yeah, I'd like to know where all these four-wheel cars came out of, because are they new models that differ from the traditional three wheels?
Yeah, something like well, it depends on a certain point of view about those four-wheel cars.
So I loved. I loved, and the Gorn I have is as well the, appearance of the Defiant, and the person behind it. I mean, the shadowy figure. So, Section 31 obviously is there, and this is sort of, we bring back Boimler's, clone, and so, there's these hints of the big bads that are like, appearing more and more, and whether, I mean, this will also be, is Section 31 appearing because they're a big bad, or is Section 31 appearing because, they've noticed the rise of the big bad, so behind the scenes they're getting ready to prep against their rise. So the gold moment for me is kind of like, okay, what role is Section 31 playing here?
Yeah. I think that William is a fairly nefarious person. I mean, he was willing to throw Brad under the bus in order to stay on the Titan and advance his career. I was sort of talking over this with a friend the other day that, okay, what if you have William and Brad? Now we've had two prior instances of a transport accident creating an exact copy of somebody else. The first one is, of course, the classic series episode Enemy Within, in which transport accident divides Kirk into his more intellectual, somewhat passive self and his regular Shatner self. The other one, of course, is William and Thomas Riker, which are just pretty much the same guy. It's just one advanced in his Starfleet career, the other one was trapped on a planet for almost 15 years. So now we've had this with Brad and William, and then it's like William is, I think, a little bit more nefarious than Brad. I think Brad has certainly become post Transporter Clones become more braver, and I think also seems to notice or not notice rather all the attractive young ladies that are throwing themselves at him. And he's, for whatever reason, he's kind of just like, whatever, I don't care. I'm wondering if that's an effect that we're going to find out about later on, if not this season, probably the next couple seasons down the road. That the transporter accident didn't just make exact duplicates; it actually split the personalities. So because as we've seen, the other thing is like Brad seems a lot less tentative and more assertive, more you know something's been removed from him that was blocking him all along and has made him more daring. Or
Although,
bold Brad, as we like to call him.
well, Brad, although my counter argument to that would be like we are 50% genetic, 50% environment. And could it be the environment that he's been in with his friends lately that has caused him to become braver and bolder? I guess perhaps we will find out.
That could be. I mean, it could also be what makes him more caring, more empathetic, because he has this core group of friends that make him want to be a better person because he's around them all the time.
Sure. Uh, Charles, one thing I wanted to point out in the Goron was, and I find this hilarious, the Captain Dagger is identified as Persepolis Dagger, which sounds very impressive, and it sounds like a leader's name, and he's portrayed as like this leader. But Persepolis was the name of Alexander the Great's horse. So, Alexander Dagger, yeah, that would be like powerful name and leadership, but like Alexander's horse. I mean, try as he might, Boimler or Captain Dagger always seems to fall just a little short of being the leader that he envisions in his mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, I think that's the thing, is that he wants to be a leader. He wants the distinction, but something always trips him up in the end. And he keeps trying. You got to give him credit for that. But yeah, calling himself Bucephalus, it sounds dramatic. But yeah, I mean, it could just be that, okay, Bucephalus, he played second banana to Mariner's Alexander. And of course, you and I both know that, speaking of horses and Alexander, William Shatner once did a pilot for a TV series in the 60s about Alexander the Great, where I guess the concept was going to be Alexander and his buddies, played by Adam West and Joseph Cotton, were going to go from country to country and conquer them every week. I guess that was the whole point of the show. So I'm wondering, now that you've pointed that out, is that just sort of a or were they thinking of that? When they came up with that name, Persepolis, or is it just, it just sounded cool? It just sounded like something, and he didn't realize, it's the name of a horse.
A little bit of both, perhaps.
Yes, and then of course you had the whole reference at the end where he finds Sulu, and Sulu is taking care of of Captain Kirk's horse, and says, "The horsey is going to bite you now."
But it's also a white horse, and I will point this out because in the Comedy Central roast of William Shatner years ago,
Hmm.
um, Sulu says at the end of his like teardown of William Shatner, and the white horse that you rode in on.
I do remember that. Yeah, and Shatner did come into the roast on a horse. Yes, that was quite funny. So yeah, and yeah, those of us who have who known Bill, who have had his knows he can be charming, but he can be a little difficult at times too. And that's why I
Uh,
always sort of say, if you have a
is
choice between meeting William or meeting George, always pick George. You'll have a much more fun time.
always pick George. Much less possibility of someone, not saying it's William, but someone being in that encounter a horse's ass.
Yeah, that this is very very true. So I'm proud to say George Takei was the first guy I ever met from the original cast at a Star Trek convention. First time I ever went to a Star Trek convention back in the early '90s, and I've never missed an opportunity to see him uh, ever. It's always wonderful to see him.
I didn't know that. So my first ever met with Scotty, that was in 1992, and then it was Leonard Nimoy in 1996.
And just to drop names here, I never got to meet James, and that is one of the great regrets of my life. But I did get to meet Leonard in 2005 at a convention in Springfield, Massachusetts, and that was amazing.
Um, so quickly, true story about how I met Leonard for the first time. I was in graduate school, and I had at George Washington University. I had a class on development and health, and it was a test day, and I was supposed to give my test orally. And I asked, thinking Captain Kirk style, third alternative, I asked my instructor, could I go last? And so this had the uniqueness, I suppose, of never being asked. And she said, okay, sure. And I said this because at the Department of Interior, Leonard was doing a signing of his book, I Am Spock. And so I go there and I'm waiting in line, and it's this huge line that is, not advancing. And I've got to get back from my test. And um, there was two lines feeding into one. So summoning my best authoritative tone, I went up to an organizer and said, or I may have said, let's say this, that I was going to report them for violating the fire marshal code because there's too many people in here and it's a crisis, and I was going to like call the fire department and have this shut down unless they turn the line from two lines into one. At which point they did. I got to Leonard got to sign the book, and I was much younger in those days, so I ran from the Department of the Interior on C Street back to my classroom in George Washington University. Got there right before the end of the class, and the instructor was like, "Well, we only have one person left to give the test, the old exam, but he's not here." So, and I raised my hand. I'm like, "Oh no, I'm really here." And she was like, "Oh, okay, well, come up and give your test." So, there's a little bit of adventure involved in meeting Leonard.
Wow. Okay. So, uh, well, if we got a minute here, I will quickly tell my meeting Leonard Nimoy story. I was, like I said, it was at a convention. We had to walk up a flight of stairs to get from where the main convention was to where he was doing photographs. I was completely nervous, and of course, this being a convention, I was dressed in my Klingon costume, and I was sort of feeling a lot like Dante at the end of the Divine Comedy, just as he's going to go see God. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not ready for this. And I'm standing there very tense in line. And Leonard sees me and he smiles and says, "Oh my, don't you look scary?" And he just knocked this big weight off my shoulders. And I just laughed. And that was wonderful. And then I was at his Q&A later that day, and I managed to say to him, "Mr. Nimoy, I don't really have a question, sir. I just want to take a moment and say thank you for everything you've done. Uh, your work in and out of Star Trek has had a great meaning to all our lives, and we are so thankful to you for doing it." And he said, "I'm so glad that I called on you because I love hearing that." And so
Nice.
I still cry when I talk about that. So that was definitely one of my happier memories. But yours was definitely a lot more was definitely very interesting.
It was full of adventure.
It was. It was very adventurous. So we are coming into the home stretch here. So predictions. What are we thinking?
I think that we will find out that the woman behind giving Brad his Section 31 badge was Jadzia Dax.
Ooh, she has hinted in interviews that she would like Terry Farrell has hinted that she would like to come back somehow.
And the whole theme of like faking deaths only to come back, being on board the Defiant, the recent visit to Deep Space Nine. I'm thinking the woman is going to be Jadzia Dax,
I
or at
think
least Jadzia without the symbiote somehow.
Yeah, I forget what Jinzia's name was before she got the Dax symbiote, but yeah, that's a possibility. I think that it could very well be Terry Farrell coming back. Um, does that mean also Michael Dorn will come back as Worf in an episode? Could be.
Could be. And then this even more so after the discussion about like how cliffhangers are lame, even more so I'm holding to my guns what I've talked about here in the show that I think we're going to end the season on a cliffhanger.
I think so. I think I mean, they ended last season on a cliffhanger, and I mean, they got into this habit at the end of season 3 of TNG with ending things on a cliffhanger with, of course, the now classic episode Best of Both Worlds. So
I mean, I think the cliffhanger again. I'm sticking to my guns of it's going to be Mariner leaving Starfleet. But after viewing this episode, I might throw in an additional quirk. It could be Boimler being replaced at the end for reasons we do not know on the Cerritos, unknowingly by everyone else, by his evil clone William.
that could be, yeah. For a ship that was, when this all started, was not supposed to be the best and the brightest ship in the galaxy. It certainly has become one of the more interesting ones now, and even to the point that a lot of other people are kind of like, yeah, I wish I was on the Cerritos. There's all this interesting stuff going on over there. So yeah, it is. Yeah, I think, and I'm going to stick to this. I think all the bad guys are going to get together and do something. The ones we've encountered, Jeffrey Combs' character, Peter Hamper, William Boimler, the shady 631 people, the independent archaeologist, all that stuff. I think something's going to go down, and it should be pretty intense. So
do you think that I actually agree with you on the bad guys all coming together? Do you think that will happen? That'll be a big part of the coming season, or do you think we're going to see this at the end of this season?
Let's see. I think we were up to episode 8, so I think maybe we've got 2 more episodes. So there might be time in the next 2 episodes to set it up, or maybe it comes in next season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they want to do this last second. I think they, want something to happen here. So I guess we'll find out very shortly. I kind of think at least they might hint at it as part of a cliffhanger thing where they're like, we sort of see the Legion of Doom getting together here.
Oh, the Legion of Doom.
Yeah. We don't see enough stories with them. I really think that's where the DCCU should have gone, rather than Dark Side just yet. But yeah, it's too bad. It's too good. And I think we will see something more of this. I don't think we're done with those bad guy characters, and I don't think this is just a throwaway. That I think William is going to be coming back, and he is going to wreak havoc on our heroes. So we will have to see what happens next. So, well, we're just about out of time. Chris, you want to tell everybody where to find you, my friend?
Yes, thank you, Josh. So once again, my name is Chris Fabon, proud volunteer alumni. You can find me and the beginning of my couch burning experience on the Verde Cosplay on Instagram. And also, I will be at Baltimore Comic Con in 2 weeks. So, shout out to Baltimore Comic Con, where if you see someone dressed up as Dick Tracy, well, that's me.
And I am Josh Pritchett. You can find me at Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook. My novel or short story collection, Bigfoot and Other Tales of Supernatural, is still available on Amazon and Kindle, and is about to be sold in a real bookstore here in Charlottesville at
Ooh.
the New Dominion Bookstore, a locally owned, very well-respected local bookstore here in Charlottesville, and should be up in just a couple weeks, hopefully just before Halloween, because it is a horror novel. And of course, you can also reach me through the Northern Virginia Star Trek meetup group. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. Next week we'll be going to see Black Adam, and then next month we'll be going to see Black Panther. And a lot of fun stuff with that group, and I hope people can come join us and share their love of Star Trek with us. So with that said, I am once again Josh Pritchett Jr. Chris,
Peace and long life.
live long and prosper, everybody.